Artificial intelligence. It's coming for our jobs, but is it going to be coming for our video games as well? As you guys might remember, the last time I played World of Warships, it didn't go so hot, but that's okay. This time, I have an even better idea, an ace in the hole that's going to let me dominate the game. That's right, using our old version of Skynet 1.0 to get the secrets, the AI superhuman strategies that are going to let me crush it in World of Warships.
A successful cruiser strategy in World of Warships typically involves staying at a medium to long range from enemy ships, using your superior firepower and good maneuverability to outgun and outmaneuver them. It is also important to make use of cover and terrain to stay hidden from the enemy and avoid being targeted. Additionally, working together with teammates and coordinating attacks can also be effective in taking down enemy ships. In general, cruisers are best suited for supporting and harassing enemy ships, rather than leading the charge.
So let's crack into the game and just see what the AI-powered efforts are going to yield. So I kicked off the game in my cruiser and looked around and realized that not only was I not going to be able to lead the charge, but we were all cruisers. We had literally one battleship in the formation. So leading the charge was, well, going to be that battleship's job. I tried to follow Skynet's directions and I stayed as far away from the enemy as possible. But slowly I found a cruiser tailing our battleship. And the battleship wasn't engaging it at all, but I swooped in, got my first kill, taking out that cruiser, protecting our battleship. Then, of course, I found another cruiser, and I relied on my speed and maneuverability to chase it down, and nailed the second kill. Then, right in front of me was another damaged cruiser fleeing the scene, and I was not going to let that one get away either. I took that out, pivoted around, and found suddenly I was surrounded. I decided to listen to the AI and use the terrain to put something between me and the enemy, only to find another cruiser that immediately took me down. But when I looked at the stats, I realized at 3 kills, I was 3 times as good as the next best player. Now I needed a strategy for
a successful battleship strategy in World of Warships typically involves staying at a medium to long range from enemy ships, using your heavy armor and powerful guns to outgun and outlast the enemy. It is also important to make use of cover and terrain to stay hidden from the enemy and avoid being targeted. Additionally, working together with teammates and coordinating attacks can also be effective in taking down enemy ships. It is also crucial to be aware of your battleship's strengths and weaknesses. For example, some battleships have very strong armor on the front and sides, but weaker armor on the rear. Knowing this, you can position your ship in such a way that the enemy will have a harder time hitting your weak spots. In general, battleships are best suited for leading the charge and providing fire support for your team. It's also important to use the right ammunition depending on the target. For example, using armor-piercing shells for heavily armored ships and high-explosive shells for unarmored ships or targets with weak spots. Finally, it's also important to be aware of the enemy's composition, spotting and avoiding enemy destroyers, as they can cause a lot of damage to battleships with their torpedoes.
So its initial guidance is basically the exact same thing as the cruiser. It only started to vary when it talked about my need to lead the charge and to use the right shells for the job, which is actually some pretty good insights. And of course, it's like watch out for destroyers, which is, well, no kidding. It's like you also watch out for tigers or bad drivers. That's not the same thing as a strategy to avoid them. World of Warships is actually the sponsor of today's video, and it is a massive game. They have new content drops every single month from new ships, new classes, new cosmetics, new nations. They even have collabs with other franchises like King Kong and Azure Lane. The graphics and environments are out of this world with over 40 maps, dynamic weather, and graphic and texture updates that make the water, haze, snow, and rain all feel immersive. And like real naval combat, strength comes not just from numbers, but by having different vessels work together. Ship classes include battleships, destroyers, aircraft carriers, cruisers, and even submarines. I'm personally partial to the massive firepower of the battleship, the stealthy hit and run of destroyers, or the jack-of-all-trades Swiss Army knife, the cruiser. You can play by yourself or in a division game with your friends, and it's even available for console. World of Warships is a great blend of action and strategy. Plus, it's free to play and super easy to get into. So check out my link to download World of Warships below. All right, so my game as the battleship kicked off, and I had to find that balance between leading the charge and keeping my distance. So I had my work cut out for me, especially given the eerie warnings by the AI to watch out for the destroyers. So as I looked around, I realized, thankfully, I was not alone. There were several other battleships in my formation, mercifully. And of course, as soon as I saw the destroyers, I didn't have anything better to do. I just pumped some rounds into them. With a limited level of success, of course, except for right there where I took out the first destroyer right away, scoring my first kill of the day. Next, I pivoted to another battleship. Obviously, I was the only one with the firepower to take their battleship on, and that's exactly what I did. In fact, we tried to double team it, myself and another battleship here, right? The whole point of leading the charge only works, of course, if your team doesn't run into you, which they just did. But that's okay. I moved on, stayed focused, and continued to punish this battleship as it came around. The fight slowly dragged on more and more, and we're gonna see in a minute here, I realized this was not the genius battleship commander that I was worried about. You can see here again, there is another near collision. And you watch this battleship just really not paying close attention to me at all. Set him on fire. And it's not clear. Maybe I've knocked out his rudder. I didn't pay close enough attention. But you see, I actually am in danger of running into him as well, completing, of course, my trifecta of running into every ship in this area, this entire battle. Not recommended by the AI, I should add. And there's those destroyers, those pesky destroyers, hitting me with torpedoes. I look back, I don't even see where he is, but I do see this battleship run aground. And truly, I try to split my attention between the other battleships who are still able to maneuver and still continue to try to finish the job on this battleship, who has now turned himself around and is now at least off of shore. I am doing nothing the AI has said. I am surrounded by enemies on all sides, and desperately I'm trying to use some of the terrain to give me an advantage. While it recommended using the terrain for the cruiser and told me to switch shells, I basically stayed on HE shells this entire time. But finally, I worked through that battleship, giving me my second kill of the game. Then I turned around and pivoted and saw that one of my allied battleships was in a duel with an enemy battleship, and there's one thing we know from the military: no fair fight should ever be allowed to persist. And I decided to make it unfair by intervening, especially given that I was on the aft of this enemy battleship, and I decided to really work him over. But I got a little distracted. As you can see, I have hit a friendly ship, an enemy ship, and then I was in imminent danger of hitting, of course, the island. But thankfully, I was able to turn my way around and continue to encircle this battleship, just about ready to give it, and it ended up becoming my third kill of the match. Then I looked, there was still another battleship, though I realized at this point that me and this other battleship were again probably some of the last friendlies on the map. So while survivability, getting kills is all useful, unfortunately the AI, I was the only one getting the great AI tier advice. And we could see, oh, there it is. There's where I ran into that. Yep. Ended up not paying attention to where I was going and immediately ran myself aground just before I was destroyed as the last member of my team. But nonetheless, when I looked at the data, it was clear I was by far the star performer of the team with 4 kills. All right, lads, well, there you have it. Clearly, the answer is obvious, that the AI is here to take all of our jobs and all of our hobbies. You know, I, for one, welcome our new machine overlords. As always, guys, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks to World of Warships for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.